Welcome into a brand new episode of the Whole Story Podcast, and I am so excited to be joined by one of my favorite people in the game of baseball. He is currently the special assistant to the president and general manager of the Washington Nationals, Mr. Dan Jennings. Dan, thanks so much for spending some time away from fishing this morning to come on the podcast today. How are we doing today?
Doing great, Alex. Happy New Year to you. It's good to see you, and I would have to echo that. You're one of my favorite people. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you, share some time at the ballparks, and certainly wishing for big things. I know big things are coming for you, so I wish you the best.
Well, thank you. So, obviously, before we started, we were talking about your fishing experience this morning. So, what was that like for you today?
So I live here just outside of Mobile, Alabama, and we don't have very cold temps. But this morning it got down to 29. So
Wow.
my brother, who works for the Baltimore Orioles, he's got 32 years in the game. I had told him I was going to take him out fishing because it's been a real good fall and winter for fish here. And so we went out and we caught about 20 speckled trout, and I had a great morning. And I told him, I said, "Man, I forgot I got a Zoom call at 2 o'clock, so I'm gonna have to get off the water." And so we cleaned the fish up, put the boat on, and was able to make it. So we had a great time. Always fun to spend time with your brother.
How much baseball talk did you guys have?
Quite a bit. We just talked about different things. You know, he's an amateur scout, covers the Southeast, and so we talked about the season and it getting started, and kind of where we are on our side, the pro side, waiting for the lockout to hopefully end soon and get back to business as usual. And we always talk about his players that he has drafted over the last few years and how they're doing and where they'll start and play this year.
Now, your story is interesting to me, and you mentioned Mobile, Alabama, and that's where it kind of all got started, right, for you. Became a high school teacher and then a coach. Did you ever think when you first started coaching that you would then transpire into the career that you've had in the game?
No, I've been very blessed and so appreciative of the opportunities that I've had. I'm about to start my 35th year in the game, and honestly, there's not a hat that I haven't worn, and I'm thankful that I've been able to do that. Going back, as I signed out of a tryout camp with the Yankees, and unfortunately had a tragic lack of talent, and they pushed me out into another avenue. And so I started scouting first as a bird dog or an associate scout back in the mid 80s. Then I hired on full time with Seattle, scouted all the Southeast, then became a cross checker, then eventually a scouting director in Tampa. Then from there left, went to Miami as a VP of player personnel, then became an assistant GM, then a GM, and then a field manager down on the field. And now I'm a special assistant working with Mike Rizzo and the Washington Nationals. So very blessed and lucky to have the opportunities I've had, and certainly enjoyed every minute of the ride.
I want to go back to the bird dog thing. How crucial is that position in the game?
Well, when I started, that was 1986. I was helping a gentleman named Julian Mock, who was the scouting director for the Cincinnati Reds, and it was kind of my first break to get my foot in the door. Now a lot of guys that get their opportunity start out as an intern, and they work their way through an internship that leads to a full-time job, and then they advance their careers. So for me to go in the scouting field and be able to do that as an associate or bird dog, it was tremendous for me. I learned a lot, and at that time I was by far the youngest guy in this area, and there was a lot of guys here that had many 30, 40, 50 years of experience, and they shared a lot of things with me that helped me throughout my career.
Did you ever feel intimidated being surrounded by people that had all that experience in the game?
No, you know what? I believe in the mindset, if you give respect, you get respect. And so I tried to show them their respect. I knew what they had done and how it had been, for them to not only get in the game, but stay in the game for their length of time. And because of that, I think that they accepted me and shared a lot of things with me that helped grow me.
What was your biggest takeaway, a piece of advice that still you rely back to now in your career?
So there was a gentleman named Stan Waziak who was the king of the minors. I believe to this day he still holds the record for the most minor league victories. And one time at a game, I said, Mr. Stan, any advice you can give a guy just getting started? And he says, yes, sir. He said, God gave you two ears and one mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk.
I think that's perfect. That's perfect.
He, he was a great individual, and he was a longtime manager in the Dodger system, and he was known the title as King of the Minors, and really was a tremendous baseball guy. And I just was very lucky to have so many of these guys to take me in and share things with me. And most of them are now deceased, but man, their lessons will live forever.
When you first got into the game, how much analytics were involved?
Statistically, I think there's always been certain levels of analytics, certainly not to the level of today. But I can remember when we used to have to, we had to look up all the information regarding to go out and do your professional reports. You had a baseball digest and a minor league digest, and you would look up each individual player and it would have their career breakdown statistically. And, you learn to look at things like slugging percent and extra base hits versus an average, and on base walks and strikeouts, different things that way that later morphed into OPS and the different stats that are used now. um, Now I look at it and I think, like a lot of things in this game, they're great to have and they can help you put the puzzle together. I don't think there's one way that is the only way. Uh, and I like to use the analogy: when you're young, your parents teach you to look both ways before you cross the street. Well, I think as an evaluator, if you look at the old school scouting side and you look at the new school analytical side, you can arrive with the best decisions. And ultimately, that's what you're after, is to make the right decision.
So we'll switch gears, talk about your career. When you first started with the Marlins as in their front office, and then you worked your way up and became the general manager, how much do you feel like your experience as a bird dog scout went into being the general manager?
I think it laid a foundation. Um, I think you look back anytime you get to the level of 35 years or more in the game, you look back, it's just like spring training for players. You go there and you know what to do, but you're doing the fundamentals. That's what you do in spring training. And I think when you get to whatever level you are in the game, you will always fall back on the fundamentals, the base of everything you learned as you spent time in each individual job. And for me, having those opportunities, then I became an area scout for 7 years, and then I became a cross checker, and then a scouting director for 7 years. So all those jobs built a foundation that carried with me as I ascended to a general manager.
Do you feel like there's no right path, right, to become a GM? And there's so many people that are young in college and out of college that want to become eventually a major league general manager. Do you feel like that path can still be taken, or do you feel like the path to a GM has shifted over the last few years?
I think, like you said, there's no clear cut one way. There's one size doesn't fit everybody, and some people, they aspire to do something way too quick before they're ready. And for me, that is one of the greatest detriments of having a position that you haven't worked towards and put the time in to learn the craft. And then other guys, they're ahead of the curve. They're extremely intelligent. They're good listeners. They have the ability to put the puzzle together, and they can move quicker. For me, I needed to go step by step as I did, and I look back now at the 7 years as a scout, 7 years as a scouting director, 13 years as a VP of player personnel and assistant GM. all those things help me because I learn, as much what not to do as what to do. And, we had success along the way, quite a bit of it in the playoffs, two World Series championships. And so I've been blessed that way to be part of the winning and seeing what it was like and what it took.
How do you measure intelligence in the game?
I think it's, there's different ways of doing that. I always refer to bright and smart. Is it book smarts and you can analyze everything and you know the numbers and the averages? And then there's bright, a person who sees the game through a different lens and you understand the depth of the game inside the game. And they're both very valuable. There's a spot for both of them. And I think there are some people who are truly blessed that have both, they're bright and they're smart. And I think there are other people that they can land a spaceship on the moon, but they may get hit crossing the street. So there's avenues for both of those in any organization, and I think they're much needed in every organization.
I think it would be remiss to not talk about your experience as a manager on the field level, like you said earlier. And it was reported, I mean, this was something that really hasn't been done in the game of baseball, where you're a general manager and then you become the manager. What did you learn most back in 2015 working in the game?
First and foremost, I'll tell you, it was the greatest education that I could have never bought. You couldn't go to school and get the education that I got managing in the big leagues. You learn a lot about the players. I truly learned what makeup was, not just makeup to discuss and talk about, but makeup between the lines of what a winning player is. It's one of the things in the game that I don't think we spend near enough time talking about is a winning player. And you know it when you're around them. You know it when you spend 160, 180 days with these guys and you watch them as they fight through the adversity that they fight through. You see insecurities. You see who can rise to the occasion when it's time to do something big in a moment in the game. You also see the mental toughness who can play through, some things that are uncomfortable because no one over the course of 162 games is comfortable every day and feels good. So for me, it was the understudy of learning the makeup and what a winning player truly.
We just had Dayton Moore on this podcast earlier this week, Dan, and he said energy is a must need to get through the 162 games. Is there anything else besides energy that either you need, front office members need, players need to get through the 162 games?
Got to have a short memory. Dayton Moore is one of my favorite people in this game and has been for a long time. I have the utmost respect for who he is as a person and what he's done as a general manager and as a baseball man because he too worked his way to that level and he's done very well. But energy is so important. You talk about setting a culture that motivates winning and sustains winning. It starts with energy, and energy is so important through the clubhouse for all the players that are involved that make up your roster at any given time during the season. The other, as I mentioned, is a short memory. You're going to have some nights and weeks and streaks that are tough. I mean, they're unbearable, and you get frustrated. And these guys are 21, 25 years old. They go to the hotel. They see it on they flip on the TV and they look at their failures over and over. And so they got to be mentally tough and their memory has to be short. You know what? They're 0 for 4 today is going to turn into a 4 for 4 tomorrow. They have to have that mindset to be successful, and the good ones do.
Do you feel like that's the same for front office members too, to have that short memory?
I think so. I think one thing that the front office people whom I've been around that have been successful are not afraid to learn from their mistakes. They're also not afraid to be right. Sometimes too many people, they want everything put together before they make a decision. They're afraid to be right. Sometimes you have to take some chances. You got to go with your gut. You have to go with the gut feeling of other people in the room after you do your due diligence to make that decision. And for me, a lot of guys fail to learn from their mistakes, or either they've never made any. I've been around some guys in the ballpark, and man, all they've ever done is make right decisions. Well, the way you learn is you make some wrong decisions, and that may, because if you are worth your salt, you're going to go through and determine, why did I do that? Why did I think that time when I made that decision? Where did we go wrong? And if you're honest with yourself and you do a true self assessment, then you can make better decisions when you're confronted with that same situation later.
Now, you've mentioned winning players and winning in front offices. How do you define winning? Is it winning that World Series championship at the end of the year, because only one out of 30 teams can do that? So how do you define winning?
That's the ultimate goal. But winning for me is building, from a front office standpoint, building an organization that has a continual flow of talent. That starts with the scouts who are able to go out, evaluate, and identify guys. You get them into your system. Then it turns over to development, and a development program that has a way to develop these players, to take what the scouts saw and to take these players and improve on their abilities that was brought into the organization. Then you have to teach that mindset of, you know what, you got to continue to grind your way there every day. um, Making the major leagues is not the ultimate goal. Staying in the major leagues is the ultimate goal. And the successful organizations instill that from the time they bring the players in. And that's where sustainability of seeing teams that continue to have success year after year. Once you get to the season, which is the ultimate goal, to get to that dance, then it's just who's the hottest team at the right time. I've been very be part of two of them, and we got hot at the right time. And in the end, we were on top of the mountain, last man standing, and that is the goal that we all work towards.
I mean, that Nationals team that won the World Series now seems like forever ago. That's the ultimate baseball story, in my opinion, right? Where it's like you just never know about what a team might be able to do at any moment in time. What did you learn from that year?
Well, I learned two things. Number one, everyone around the ball club and the media, different things, were talking about fire the manager, fire Davey Martinez. I forget what our record was. We were 19 and 31, 19 and 31, 50 games in. It would have been so easy for Mike Rizzo to just fire the manager and listen to all the people around him, who were trying to get us to make a move. To Mike Rizzo's credit, it's one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my time in the game. He believed in what we had built, what we had set up. He believed in Davey and his staff. And from that day forward, best record in baseball and ended up winning the World Series. When you have a leader who is that strong in his belief with the players, with the manager, with the personnel that's brought in and help build that team, that's a guy who understands what it takes to be a winner. Mike Rizzo is a winner, and his mindset that year, I know we're better than 19 and 31. I know this is going to get better. And he went with his heart and his gut, believing in Davey Martinez, and the rest is history.
I know we've talked about something like this topic before about the importance of a manager and how you can value their importance to a win and loss rate over the course of a season. And that kind of brings that point around.
Without a doubt. And I think, when the biggest relationship in any organization for me is the general manager and the manager. There has to be a trust, an openness, a communication that nothing can stand in the way. You don't keep anything from each other. And when you truly have that, then you can make the best decisions. And that's what Riz and Davey had. And they were able to know that the good times were coming. Just get through this 19 and 31 spell, and these guys will play to the level of the ability that we knew they had, and that's what occurred.
How much do you think the manager role has evolved and since you've gotten in the game to now?
I think now that there's some things that are taken away from the managers, and I think it's unfortunate because another lesson that I learned in that dugout, you live with these guys. You know who's sick. You know whose wife is at home sick or with a sick child or things that are not going good. You get to know that player at that moment, who is available in the bullpen, who's a little tender, and if you can stay away, stay away. And as much as you want it to be push button, it's not that. So the more that you know your players as a manager, then you can put them in the best position for success and success on that night. And sometimes you have to be willing to know that, man, we're going to go out and give it our all, but this probably isn't going to be our night. We're facing this guy who's on his way potentially to win a Cy Young. And I don't want to lose this series by unloading my bullpen tonight when really our chances are not that great. Give these guys an extra day off in the pen, and somebody will just have to wear it, and then you play better your next 2 or 3 games, depending on the length of the series.
Do you believe there is analytics involved where, because the argument is, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong or not, but analytics cannot determine hot and cold streaks. So how do you manage, I would say, or managers nowadays manage hot and cold streaks while utilizing analytics at the same time?
Well, you would hope that the manager would have enough freedom to ride the hot hand. It's just like playing blackjack. You know what? If you're at the blackjack table and you're rolling and you got the streak going, you're not going to just all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm going to jump off of this and stop. I mean, maybe you do, but I don't see how that makes you a winner. That's just that's blind luck if it happens for you. And I think some of that, I mean, just look at the playoffs of the last few years. You've seen some of this come into play, and hey, some of the mindset is great. We'll have the matchups and, no third time through and things like that. Well, it's bitten some teams in the postseason. And that's when you need to trust your manager. Just like you want to trust the analytical side and go with the numbers, sometimes you got to trust that guy in the dugout that's lived with these guys since February 15 in the beginning of spring training, because no one is going to know the players like the manager and his coaches, period. And so I think it's a happy medium, and I think you can find that, but it needs to always be that to where there's give and take on both sides. Look both ways before you cross that street.
Did something ever surprise you? I guess the question would be, what surprised you most being the manager for the Marlins back in 2015?
Oh, for sure, the speed of the game. Let me tell you what, the farther you get away from the field, the slower the game is. The closer you get to it in that dugout, especially in the National League at that time, because there was so many things that basically from the fifth inning or even earlier, a, a starter to go out and have a rough outing and you had to get to your bullpen early. The speed of the game and thinking, or if you're in a close game and you got a starter who's pitching well, but you got runners at second and third and the game's tied, or you're up or down a run, and man, I don't want to lose this starter, but this may be our best opportunity to score, and you take him out and pinch hit. So there's so much that goes into it. And, for the guys who have done this and have achieved great success, I tip my hat because for the first couple of weeks, I had two hamsters inside this head running full speed, and you realize that it moves very fast.
Overall, what you just said is the term is game planning. And I think game planning isn't talked enough about with baseball fans. They always hear about it, and making the decisions. What would be your biggest thing that went into your game planning when you've been around the game?
When I was managing, I would sit before every series with the staff. We'd have a staff meeting and talk about, things that we could to take advantage of and put our guys in the best position to succeed. We had a third base, infield, outfield, base running guy, Brett Butler, who had a tremendous career in the major leagues, had one of the best eyes I've ever been around to pick things up so that our would-be base stealers could have a key and steal bases. And I made sure Bugsy, he always would spend time with those guys before the start of a series and give them indicators and help these guys. So uh, Chuck Hernandez was our pitching coach. We spent a lot of time going over, how we wanted to attack certain hitters. We had a charts that would come in, who's hot, who's not, bullpen wise, the matchups, and I had all of that on paper. And so as the game unfolded, we were prepared. Didn't mean you would be successful, but you had done the work prior to be prepared and be ready to implement those.
Obviously, like you said at the beginning, you've worn many hats in your career in the game, almost 35 years of it. Has there been a favorite hat?
And I have to say, the hat I'm wearing, love working here with Rizzo and being in this position. The most interesting job, fast paced, nonstop job, was certainly the manager. I loved being that. And like I said, it was the greatest education that you couldn't have bought or learned. But being here now, with a lot of people who basically got their beginning and worked their way to where they are in the game, was the same way that I started. And so you kind of, the respect factor, knowing that these guys did the same thing that you've done. You've seen each other on the trail since the late 80s, early 90s. And so I think that having the chance to work together as a group, winning the World Series like we did, now hitting the reset button and putting it back together, it's been a lot of fun.
What would you say has been the most fulfilling position?
The most fulfilling is probably the GM's job because you're basically putting the puzzle together. You're hearing from all the people. You're overseeing all the departments, and so you kind of set the course of what you want to see and what you think over your years, things that you've learned. Uh, Put them in place and build that organization so that it can be successful and sustain that success as you go forward.
Obviously, you work with Mike Rizzo now. When was the first time you met him? Do you remember that first meeting that you had with him?
Oh, well, the first time I met Riz was back in the late '80s. He was a scout with the Chicago White Sox, and they sent him into the Southeast to cover the territory, and also, find a help find a full time guy for this position. And all he did was come down here and draft this big first baseman out of Auburn University that became a Hall of Famer by the name of Frank Thomas. So I always had great. Riz is a grinder. He's the ultimate grinder, and he goes about things the right way. He's not afraid to speak his mind, and if he needs to step on toes, he'll do that. At the same time, he'll embrace you and show the love as well. So, you always know where you stand, and that's easy to respect a man like that.
Dan, this is my favorite part of any interview I do. It's a fast five quick round. It's five quick questions, and you have much
Okay,
time to answer them as needed. Are you ready?
I guess I'm ready. It sounds like a hot seat.
What was your favorite ballpark you've ever been to?
Oh, Pittsburgh, no doubt about it. It's you see it, sit there in the afternoon and you watch that sunset. You look at the three rivers out there, and the sun sets on those buildings. It just, if heaven has a ballpark, I think that's exactly what it's going to look like.
Who's one person in the game you haven't got the chance to work with that you would love to work with?
Theo Epstein. I always had great admiration. I got to know Theo well, and from things I've heard, from other people that have worked with him and my time around him and our conversations, I've always found him very intriguing, very intelligent, and he's a forward thinker, and his success speaks for itself.
Do you have a favorite sports movie?
Oh, for sure, Major League.
It's one of the best.
Oh, it's hilarious. It just some of the greatest lines, and just every time you see it, it's like you see something that you didn't see before, and makes you laugh.
Who's your favorite broadcaster in the game of baseball today?
Today, oh man, Vin Scully for sure before, and Bob Carpenter with us, now with the Nats. I love his voice, and he's so well prepared. So I'd say Carp right now for Scully's out.
Well, he's the best too because I don't know if you know this about him. I might have told you this, but for us broadcasters, he has his own scorebook.
That's it. Keeps it. He's one of the most meticulous guys. They actually did a show during the game, and they would show shots of his book this past season. And wow, he's very good at it and very meticulous.
And then the last one for the Fast Five, what would be one of your favorite snacks that you like to have?
Oh, I'm a chips and salsa guy. Anytime, every time. So definitely chips and salsa for me.
That's right. You can't go wrong.
No, that's all. I mean, if you get bad chips and salsa, just get up and leave. Don't even sit and eat the meal. Just walk out.
And then the last question I have for you, Dan, it's one I always end the podcast on to a new guest, and this is the first time I've interviewed you on any podcast I've done. And it's simple. Is if a 15-year-old kid walked up to Dan Jennings right now and said, Dan, I'm never going to watch baseball. I don't like it. I'm never going to watch it. What are you saying to that 15-year-old kid?
Well, my first question would be why. I'd want to hear, his why. I think it's important sometimes people want to evoke their opinions on someone else's thoughts without ever hearing that young man's thoughts. So if a 15-year-old male or female were to say that to me, I would want to know their why. And then through that, try to understand, their reasoning. And then if I could shed some light to try to help win them over as a fan, then I certainly would. And I would hope after 35 years, there's things that you could share that would shed some light on why baseball is the greatest sport and hopefully turn them into a fan. And at worst case, at least get them to give it a try, get them to the ballpark, and the game itself could turn them into a fan.
Well, again, you're one of my favorite people in the game, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on the Whole Story podcast today.
I appreciate it, Alex. Great questions. You made it a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got off that boat in time to make it. Thank you.